Now, having understood how the entire muscle contraction is happening, we need also to understand the relaxation part, how the skeletal muscles relax. Basically, as we saw with the acetylcholine and acetylcholinesterase, that because of we are removing the acetylcholine, there is no more sodium getting in, there is no more excitation. The same thing would happen with the contraction. Basically, we need, since the calcium was initially the cause of the contraction, initially is the calcium ions that being released from the SR, then we need to restore or to put these calcium ions back into the SR. And this is happening through an ATP. So there is a calcium pump that is going to push calcium back into this into SR. I need you to think of why it is ATP, why it is not active, why it's active transportation and not passive transportation. I need you to think of this and write your answers in the forum below. Okay, but anyway, this is an active transportation of the calcium back to pump it back into the SR, and this would requires ATP. And once the calcium is back, it means that the troponin is getting back, restoring its shape, and therefore the tropomyosin is going back to block the actin, the myosin head from getting inside the actin. And that actually what causes the relaxation of skeletal muscle. Okay, few other things. And this part is like relatively very simple comparing to the other parts of this chapter. For the frequency of motor neuron stimulation, now we understand, for example, if you are walking, it means that you are continuously stimulating your muscles, or the muscles are continuously stimulated to produce this movement. So scientists came up to understand this better. They came up with something called the muscle twitch. Now, muscle contraction, as we saw, it's a result of an action potential. So they call the muscle twitch is when it's a muscle contraction resulted from a single action potential. So it's muscle twitch is a single action potential from a motor neuron that will produce a single contraction in the muscle. So when we have, if we ever have a single action potential resulted in a single contraction, that will be the muscle twitch. So a twitch can last a few milliseconds or 100 milliseconds depending on the muscle type. Like the muscles in our eyes, they will take only few milliseconds to contract. Whereas, for example, in the gastrocnemius muscle, it may take like 100 or 200 milliseconds to contract. Still, this is like 100 milliseconds, still is extremely fast, beyond our realization. But comparing between two muscles, this is like for the eye muscles, it's extremely fast. Now, this tension can be measured by something called myogram, and this machine can measure the tension, the amount of tension produced over time. So the muscle twitch, in general, we can break it into three areas. There is the latent period, there is the contraction period, and there is the relaxation period. The latent period is the area from receiving, or the time from the point, or it's a period, it's a time from receiving excitation, from receiving the message, up all the way till calcium ions released from SR. The contraction period is the cross bridge, and the relaxation period is restoring calcium ions into SR. So these are the component of the muscle twitch. Latent period, contraction period, and relaxation period. As we said, latent period is when the action potential is being propagated along the sarcolemma and calcium ions released from the SR. Then the period of contraction, when calcium ions bind to troponin, tropomyosin has shifted and the cross bridge formed. And here we have actually the actual contraction. Then the period of relaxation, when that is the time when calcium ions are pumped into the SR. So every muscle is going or having the three periods of contraction or of twitching. The difference is how fast it's going to twitch. Like for the eye muscles, they are going to be like really super fast, within 5 to 10 milliseconds. Some muscles like this, I think this was like either gastrocnemius or another big muscle, it's around 100 milliseconds. Like for example, the heart, the cardiac muscle is around 400 milliseconds. Smooth muscles around like 600 milliseconds. This is still fast, but comparing to these muscles, to the skeletal muscles, this is extremely fast. And I need you also to think, why do we need like such rapid contractions in these skeletal muscles? What is the importance of this, or what's the advantage of having very quick muscle twitch in some of these muscles? And post your answers in the forum. The last part is the energy for contraction and the usage of ATP. Technically, during a muscle contraction, we need ATP supplies in three areas or in three positions. First one is to deattach the cross bridges. If you remember here, we said in order for the myosin head to become flat, we need ATP. ATP is required to deattach this cross bridge. This is the first one. Second position is to transport calcium ions back into the SR. And the third position, or the third usage of ATP, is at the service for the sodium potassium pump. We need to pump the sodium ions out and bring the potassium ions in order to restore the membrane potential on the following action potential. So these are the three areas where we need ATP supplies. Now, it depends on the type of muscle. We have various amount of ATP stored in these muscles. However, in all of them, muscles store very limited supplies of ATP. Now, some muscles will have more, some muscles will have less, but in general, it's very low supplies, meaning that it's going to activate or run the muscles only for a few seconds worth of contractions. However, if the muscle is going to contract more than that, it has to produce ATP. And that's why we have a lot of mitochondria in the muscles, because we are producing and we are requiring a lot of ATP. Now, in the three ways for producing ATP in the muscle, there is a direct way by phosphorylating ADP by keratin phosphate. So this is like, think of it as an enzyme. It's a kinase that will add an organic phosphate to the ADP and make it ATP. So ADP plus inorganic phosphate will give us ATP. Okay, so this is very rapid mechanism. Will be able to provide ATP for around 15 seconds worth of energy. And after these 15 seconds, there should be another mechanism kicked in. Think of it like if I have to start running suddenly, usually the muscles are going to use this mechanism to provide the initial energy for the muscle. Like say, for example, I'm going to run away from a danger. Muscles are going to use the keratin phosphate to produce very quickly ATP. But after 15 seconds of running, the muscles need to switch to a more efficient way of producing energy. Because after 15 seconds, this enzyme will be consumed, the ADP will be consumed, and there is no more way of producing energy. So the second way would be either the anaerobic pathway or the aerobic respiration. And these are the two main pathways of producing ATP. So this is the ATP with the keratin, it's a keratin phosphate, then ADP again with the keratin kinase will create, we will get the phosphate from here, we'll give it to the ADP and we'll create the ATP and the keratin. So this is with the first mechanism. The second mechanism would be the aerobic respiration. With aerobic respiration, the main thing about aerobic respiration is that it requires oxygen. So aerobic respiration is about oxygen. If there is oxygen, then it is aerobic respiration. The starting material or what we need to produce the ATP from here, we need blood glucose, or we can use, blood glucose, we can use pyruvic acid, we can use fatty acids. So technically we can use sugar or fat or sometimes the proteins to produce ATP. Okay, so now scientists decided that the basic unit of measuring ATP production would be the glucose. Okay, through aerobic respiration, one molecule of glucose will give us, I think it was 32 ATPs. Just let me double check, was it 32? I think it was either 32 or 34. We'll double check that. But anyway, it's like enormous amount of ATP per one glucose molecule. Okay, so one glucose molecule will give us 32 ATP molecule. This is extreme amount. This is like very efficient way of producing glucose. And this again requires oxygen happening in the mitochondria. There are some side products like heat, CO2, and water. But the main part is one glucose is going to give us 32 molecules of ATP. Now, this process is very long. It takes hours. And of course, it will provide energy, provides ATP for hours also. Basically, the aerobic respiration is the main mechanism. If you are sitting down, not exercising, not doing anything, your breath rate is normal, then you are using the aerobic respiration. And technically, like the general advice to lose weight that you need to burn these fats is to do aerobic exercises, meaning that you don't need your oxygen to drop. And if the muscles feel that there is less oxygen, they will switch to anaerobic respiration. Basically, you need to burn the fats, not the glucose, in order to lose weight, because it's all about the weight is all about the fat. Okay, so that is the aerobic respiration. However, if you are exercising, for example, and you start to have like short breath, you are like starting to inhale and exhale like rapidly, this is a sign that the muscles are not getting enough oxygen, and therefore they are going to switch to the anaerobic pathway. Anaerobic, it means no oxygen provided or needed. No oxygen needed to provide energy. However, the downside of this mechanism that it's using only glucose. So with the anaerobic respiration, there is no more burning of fat. Fat are not burned anymore, only glucose. And one glucose molecule would give us only 2 ATPs. One glucose will give us only 2 ATPs. Comparing with the aerobic, it was one glucose will give us 32 ATPs. Here, it's very inefficient. However, the advantage is this is very fast. This is very rapid mechanism. Very rapid mechanism. Okay, so blood glucose or the glycogen will turn into glucose, and now within the cell, within the muscle cells, this glucose would be broken down if there is no oxygen to ATPs and some other side products, and that would produce the ATP needed under these conditions. Now, if you might ask about muscle spasms or muscle cramping or all of these things, it's simply a result of lack of ATP. So if there is no more ATP, what happens is that here we can't break the cross bridge. So with no ATP, myosin head would remain attached to actin. So it's exactly like, gears. Let's draw some gears. It's difficult to draw gears. Okay? So with the gears, they are stuck within each other. And there is no way to move them. That is exactly the muscle spasm or the muscle cramping. There is no ATP to dislocate or to take the head out, and that's what would cause the muscle spasms. Okay. Last few things about skeletal muscles and how do they interact within our body. The things about skeletal muscles that they are going only to pull, not to push bones. Now, I believe you are fine with the insertion and origin. I'm not going to talk about them. But for muscles, are pulling only, no push, or no pushing. They don't push. So, like this, for example, when I'm doing this flexion, okay, what happens is that the biceps from here attached to the radius and to the ulna, it's pulling the forearm into this position. That is its prime movement. The prime movement of the biceps is to cause this flexion. But if this is because the muscle contracted. But if the biceps relaxed, the forearm will stay the same. It won't be pushed. It won't go back into extension. Why? Again, because the muscles are only pulling. So in order to do the extension, the triceps have to contract and pull the forearm into this direction, and that will cause the contraction. Okay? And in this way, we have the two terms, agonist and antagonist. Agonist and antagonist. So muscles are working as pairs of agonist and antagonist. Agonist will produce a movement in one direction. Antagonist will produce an opposite movement in the other direction. So muscles only pull, bones never push. So biceps are going to do the flexion. The triceps are going to do the extension. This is agonist, antagonist muscles. And it doesn't matter which one is the agonist, which one is the antagonist. It's like pairs. And here in this table, you have like several types of these muscles. In the lab, you would see some of them. Like we have the biceps brachii and the triceps. We have the hamstring and we have the quadriceps femoris. We have the flexor digitorum and the flexor and the extensor digitorum. All of these are pairs of agonist antagonist skeletal muscles. Okay, so this is the end of this chapter. I want you to add your questions into the forum, and when we meet, we will go over the questions. If you don't post your questions there, I would assume that everything is clear and I'm a perfect professor, and we will keep moving forward. Okay, but please go through these videos 1, 2, 3 times, however you like. See the other videos I'm going to post, and put your questions into the forum down, and when we meet we will work over these questions to clarify everything.